All right, here we go with edition number 2. The first time we got together, we walked through how to properly change your oil filter, proper torque for the drain plug, using your owner's manual and the special tools. So this time what we're going to do is we're going to change our primary fluid and we're going to change our transmission fluid. And the cool thing about changing those two fluids is the drain plugs are very close to each other. So you can drain them both with the same drain pan. Another really cool feature is the drain plug for the primary and the transmission. It's the exact same drain plug that the engine oil uses as well. So once we get those plugs removed, we have our oil change kit, O-ring kit. We're going to make sure we replace the O-rings on the drain plugs. We're going to pull the primary derby cover off to add the fluid back in and install a new derby cover O-ring. The owner's manual also suggests that to change the primary fluid, you want that to be at operating temperature. The transmission, it doesn't matter. But it's always a good idea whenever you drain any oils to get them at operating temperature so they flow better. So the next step is we're going to loosen up and we're going to remove the primary drain plug, which you can see it points straight down to the ground. It's located directly underneath the derby cover at the 6 o'clock position. So I'm going to use my 5/8 ratchet, crack it loose, get your drain pan underneath. Once I remove the plug, I'm able to examine the magnet. Remember we talked about that on the engine oil. So on the magnet, you could see very, very minuscule deposits, which is normal. It's just residual wear item. And I'm going to again remove the O-ring that's on this plug. And I'm just using a simple screwdriver. Continue to clean the plug, make sure it's nice and clean. And I'm going to slide my new O-ring over. So I've got a T27 socket, and I also have a T27 driver. So what I'm going to be doing with my socket and ratchet is I'm just going to be cracking them loose and remove the screws now with the driver and set those aside. But I want to caution you, if you're doing this on the ground on the kickstand, when you take off your derby cover, you may get some oil dripping out because it's leaning this way. Put my tools down, have a rag handy so I don't scratch the cover, and just bring the cover down and out. So I'm going to clean this off. I'm going to pull out my O-ring, again using my little screwdriver, clean in the groove where the O-ring was. It's got these little tabs on there. The little tabs provide contact so the O-ring stays in the recess of the derby cover. You'd actually feel it. You feel the resistance. So now your derby cover is all set. I'm going to wipe the surface where the derby cover would sit. The primary surface is now clean. The derby cover is clean. My primary is down with slow drip. So I'm going to take my drain plug, which has a new O-ring installed, and I'm going to reinstall that drain plug. Get it as tight as I can by hand. Now if you remember what I talked about with the oil drain plug, the drain plug is made out of steel and the primary cover is aluminum. There is a proper torque for the drain plug in your owner's manual, and I would caution you to refer to the owner's manual to get your proper torque, because the last thing you want to do is strip out the primary cover because it's softer than the plug. And that's at the proper torque. You can feel your wrench slip. So now that we have our derby area clean, we got the derby cover ready to go with the new O-ring. Our drain plug is tightened and torqued. I'm ready to add the correct amount of primary fluid. Again, refer to your owner's manual. In this specific model, the owner's manual instructs you to have the bike upright. For the primary fluid and the transmission fluid, I have two choices from Harley-Davidson. The Formula Plus is good for primary or transmission. It's a mineral-based oil. And as I mentioned in the oil change video, we also have the option of using SYN3 full synthetic. And the full synthetic you can use in your primary, transmission, and engine, which makes it really convenient if you do your own maintenance. You only need one type of oil. So now it's time to add our oil. Harley-Davidson makes this really nifty tool that fits into your opening on your primary cover to let you add that oil without it dripping all over the place. All right, so now looking in the owner's manual, I know the exact initial amount of oil I need to add to my primary. So I've pre-measured and added it to my container. So there are some differences on different models with the amount of oil that you add initially and how to properly check it once it's added. So once the bottle's empty, I'm going to leave the funnel on and let it drain down a bit and set this bottle aside. And I'm going to again make sure that this primary derby cover area is crystal clean and bone dry. And the same with my derby cover. If you notice on the inside of the derby cover, there's writing and numbers, and that indicates which way is up. I'm going to start my screws. So I'm going to snug them down with my driver, just snug them. Okay, so I have them all tight, and now just like the drain plug, you have a steel screw going into an aluminum cover. The steel will always win if you get it too tight. So there is a torque setting and a different sequence in how to tighten these. I'm looking in my owner's manual for the first screw to tighten. That's done. My fluid's in. My drain plug is on. So at this point, my primary fluid has been changed and properly set with the correct amount of oil. We can now move on to the transmission. So now that we have our primary all serviced, we're going to move on to the transmission fluid. And again, the cool thing is the primary, transmission, and engine oil all have the same drain plug. And I can just crack it loose. I can now continue to loosen and pull the plug the rest of the way out. And now I can inspect the magnet like I did with the engine oil and the primary. You can see the O-ring. This is a real good example of why you always want to replace your O-rings. Look how tore up the O-ring is here. So like the other drain plugs, I'm going to take a small screwdriver and I'm going to grab that O-ring and I'm going to slide over my new O-ring into the recess on the drain plug. So now while the transmission oil is draining, we're going to be moving over to the right side of the bike, identify the transmission filler plug and dipstick, which is right here. On this particular model, it's a 3/8 Allen. I like using a longer ball socket and a short stubby ratchet. And as long as it's out, you can kind of see at the bottom of the dipstick the little area which indicates your proper level. So again, in your owner's manual, it will identify the correct initial amount of oil you're going to add. This particular model, we're going to do our final transmission fluid check with the bike on the ground on the center stand. So I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to go back to the left side of the bike and check and see if all the oil has stopped draining from the transmission area. Looking at my drain plug hole, I can see I'm down to just a slight drip every 30 seconds. So I'm going to grab my drain plug now with the new O-ring, start tightening it into the hole on the drain plug. Wipe off any excess oil, and I'm just going to snug it, get my torque wrench, and the setting according to the owner's manual is 14 to 21 foot-pounds. So I've got my torque wrench set at 18. My plug is all set. I can go to the other side of the bike and start filling my oil. So I've got my fill plug removed. Got my nice Harley-Davidson funnel that fits right in that opening. I've got a predetermined amount of SYN3. I'm going to use the full synthetic in my transmission. So I'm going to pour in the predetermined amount All right, so we have our initial transmission fluid. Again, as per the owner's manual, we have our initial amount added. Remember, when we added the transmission fluid, the bike was straight up and down. Owner's manual indicates to correctly check the level, the bike needs to be on the ground, on the jiffy stand. So the bike is on the ground, on the jiffy stand. I'm going to remove the drain, or the dipstick filler plug. And remember, like we showed before, there is an add mark and there's a full mark. And the area in between is where you want your fluid to be. So we're going to thread this plug in, thread it in until it hits the O-ring, turn it back out. So the oil level, it's very hard to see because it's a chrome dipstick, but you can see the oil clinging to the bottom and kind of dripping off. So right now the oil is at the bottom of this checkered mark, indicating we do need to add a little bit more oil. So we use Sin-3 for the initial fill. So we're going to be adding a little bit more of Sin-3 and then double checking our level. And like the engine oil, a little on the low side is better than a little on the high side. But we're going to make sure that we're in between that checkered mark on the dipstick. And taking my reading, I'm now probably like the oil, I was about 60 to 70% above that bottom add mark. The dipstick does have a torque. Again, in the owner's manual, it'll give you the torque setting if your filler plug has a torque. And now my filler plug is torqued. My transmission service is now complete. My primary is all complete. The last thing I'll do is I'll look underneath the bike and make sure there's no residual drips of oil. I'll clean them up real good. And now I have a little pride of ownership by doing my own transmission and primary fluid change. But again, it seems easy. It's important to have the right tools, the right manuals, the confidence to do it yourself. And if you're not able to, your authorized Harley-Davidson dealership is standing ready to help you keep your Harley running like new. Hope you've enjoyed this. We'll see you down the road.